Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for those of you who are part of this community and have been with us before. Welcome back. Those of you who are new, welcome to your first panel discussion or WBT event. We're really happy to be doing a panel discussion with the co-founders of Women Banding Together tonight. I'm Jenny Allen. I'm one of the co-founders of Women Banding Together, or WBT. And again, thank you for being here with us tonight. I'm a Juilliard faculty member, artistic director emerita of the Philadelphia Wind Symphony, and a retired Army band conductor. I'm joined by our other co-founders. Jenny Neff is Associate Professor of Music Education and Director of the MM and Summer Music Studies at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. Lori Schwartz Reichl is an author, educator, consultant, and the founder of MakingKeyChanges.com. And Laura Johnson is the assistant conductor for the Bay Youth Wind Symphony and a band director in the Chesapeake, Virginia School District. We're all active conductors, clinicians, and presenters. Women Banding Together was organized last May to support women band directors, and we have 4 parts to our mission: to cultivate mentoring relationships for women band directors at all levels, to guide and connect directors who seek support, to create a platform to explore issues of women band directors, and to provide advice and guidance for anyone who wants to mentor women band directors. This is our 7th panel discussion we've hosted since our founding last May, and we've also hosted several happy hours this past summer. Looks like everyone is muted. I'm not sure I can see everyone, but if you're not muted, please do so. And keep your mute option on until we get to the Q&A at the end. Feel free, though, at any time during this session to use the chat function to ask questions or provide comments. And we plan to go till about 8 o'clock with this session. I'm going to hand it off to Laura now, who will introduce the topic and panelists, but I want to say first that Laura has done an extraordinary job to plan and put this whole session together for us. We're all into mentoring, but Laura is one of those fresh faces in our field and has done terrific research on mentoring as well. So this is really a true passion of hers. Laura?
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks so much. That was very sweet of you. And thank you all for being with us this evening. I want to briefly share why we chose this topic and then how we'll structure this time we have together. I think it goes without saying right now that this is a challenging time for music educators, and I think challenging is an understatement. That's a loose term there. Without the pandemic, it's completely normal to feel like you're on your own island as a band director and as a music educator in general. Sometimes you can be the only one of you in the building or maybe even in your district. And so feeling that sense of feeling alone and isolated can just happen because of the nature of our job. And then you add on a pandemic in which we're needing to socially and physically distance ourselves from one another. I say hello, feelings of isolation, there you are. We are utilizing technology and instructional models we've maybe never even seen before. Hello, feeling like inadequate and inexperienced. And we're still trying to figure out how to do what we do best. And I say hello, imposter syndrome for that statement. It's just a lot. And in addition to all of that stress and all of the concerns that we feel in general during teaching during this pandemic, feeling isolated and helpless can just really intensify. And I just want to say that I've been there. I am there right now. I'm with you. We're doing this together. We're all in need of guidance and support all of the time. We all need that mentorship all of the time, but especially right now with everything that we're experiencing. When we were brainstorming session topics, I knew that going back to our roots of mentorship, why we founded Women Banding Together, was really something we needed to do. I also knew, as someone who entered a new position during a pandemic, that was a decision that I made, that I knew that we needed to talk about these feelings of isolation and searching for guidance. It was just an absolute must. So tonight we want to share with you how to search for mentorship during this pandemic when you're feeling isolated, as well as give some healthy mentorship practices to ensure that the mentorship you are giving and you are receiving, no matter what role you are in, is meaningful. For tonight's session, we will start with the co-founders responding to 2 topics that we created about mentorship specifically during this time. And we'll then transition to answering some questions that were posed by members of the Women Banding Together community. And hopefully we can get to all of them. If we have extra time, we can maybe have time for questions from you all at the end. We encourage you, as Ginny said, utilize that chat function to share comments as we're going through, sharing some thoughts of your own experiences, adding in some questions, and as we go through tonight's session. Again, thank you all for being here. I truly appreciate you all being here with us on this Monday night, and I hope that this will be a time of support and guidance for all of us. And with that, I will pass the baton to Lori for our first question.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Our first question for tonight is, healthy relationships are essential in the mentorship experience. What suggestions or strategies can you offer to encourage healthy relationship practices between mentors and mentees? We're going to start with Laura.
I think that there are many aspects to meaningful and healthy mentorship and those relationships, but for the sake of time, I'll share my top 3. The first is having clarity and expectation about your expectations and needs for both the mentor and the mentee. Sometimes it seems like a no-brainer because we always talk about have expectations for your students, for your classroom, for yourself. So we feel like that's just a no-brainer, it's a given. But it's so easy to not be explicit with your expectations when you're in a mentorship relationship. And it's especially true when we're talking about our needs. In order for this relationship to function, just like any relationship to function, both parties need to be clear about what they want and what they expect from their relationship. And even if your relationship is just a conversation or two, if you reach out to a colleague about a question, having a clear expectation of what you want from that question and that conversation is really important. Having this clarity helps to avoid miscommunications or leaving a meeting, an experience, a conversation disappointed or not receiving or giving, depending on if you're a mentor or mentee, the information and support needed. Additionally, we have to be comfortable in talking about these expectations and needs when it comes to these relationships. If either the mentor or the mentee is feeling a certain way in the relationship, whether it's you're not supported, you're being stretched too thin, or you're not feeling challenged, that list goes on, whatever the case may be, both parties have to be vulnerable and willing to be clear about what they need from each other. And this is, again, just to avoid miscommunication or negative feelings by being proactive about those things. Secondly, having a really clear, intentional commitment to the process is important. Both parties have to be willing to put in the time and energy that a mentorship relationship requires. But of course, we are human, especially right now, important for us to remember that. So we have to be flexible and understanding and give ourselves some grace from time to time. But overall, that mentor and that mentee needs to be willing to put in the work for the relationship. And third and finally, I always follow the line in mentorship and in my normal relationships. Honesty is the best policy. If something's not working, be honest. If something is working, be honest. If you as a mentee need more guidance or support or resources, or if you as a mentor need more effort or better performance from your mentee, you have to be honest. If you don't share how you're feeling or what you're thinking, likely the other party doesn't know. This is in my relationships in my life. People are not mind readers. You have to be clear about what you're feeling and what you're thinking so they know how you feel and what you think. Just make sure that you are sharing your thoughts and feelings with your mentor or mentee. With that, I will pass the baton to Jenny.
Thanks, Laura, for that information. I totally agree with everything you said, and it's so important, especially the clarity and intention part and honesty. So thanks. I think we know that in our field, building relationships and trust as Laura was referring to, are really essential to everything that we do. And in mentoring, we know this is no different. Setting aside a designated time to talk about specific issues ensures that both the mentor and the mentee can have quality time to talk about important topics. I know maybe not so much when I was a mentee in my first years of teaching, we weren't maybe as intense in the school building. We had a little bit more time and leeway and time to connect. And, but, you know, getting it more advanced in my career and especially after 2014, I think when we kind of really upped the ante in education and pressured people for their time, I think it's really crucial to set aside some time where you really can focus 100% on what you're looking at. And that's not going to happen in the middle of the day. So when you have kids coming in and out of the room, so maybe setting aside a little bit of time specifically for that. It's also important to remember that mentoring can start with the mentor and the mentee. So the newer teacher might have some specific questions about certain topics. You know, we know some of those things that teachers have topics about that have been shown in the research, like a lot of the extraneous job responsibilities we have and things like budgets and dealing with administrators and how to order buses and, you know, how do you run your parent group and things like that, that maybe didn't have as much focus during undergrad training and pre-service training. But we also know that the mentee might have things that the mentor might have things that the mentee doesn't even know they don't know, right? So that imposter syndrome exists, and things like, you know, if I'm ordering my buses and I'm the mentor, it's probably a good time for me to call my mentee and say, you know, did you order the buses? Has anybody showed you how to use the bus forms and that sort of thing? Because you don't want to be stuck without, you know, without any buses. That's not good. And so just little things like that, that just to kind of call or text or email or whatever your form of communication is to kind of give a heads up. I know that a lot of teachers have formal mentor programs in their districts or even through their state MEAs. And those are well-meaning and often matched up with intention, but sometimes our mentorship develops in a little bit more organic way. And so I think we have a little bit of flexibility with that when it's not prescribed by our districts and our MEAs. So we can, you know, reach out on a variety of topics. Also, I think it's also important to know that your role as a mentor can look very different than someone else's. I think that we wear a lot of hats in mentorship. We can be a teacher, we can be a coach, a collaborator, a sponsor, counsel for the person. So in other words, just kind of you do you, and know that we're there to be a positive support for that person. And I think from the mentor point of view, to realize that the mentee wears different types of hats and might not need you to tell them what to do, but maybe to explore answers and what they've already been doing, so that they can kind of come to that realization of whatever they're needing on their own with your support. I also think it's important, as I learned later in my career, that mentorship can happen at any time. While it can be something that's matched and assigned, like we said, it can also happen organically and whenever you have something that's new to you. I switched from doing a high school band job at one point to doing band and orchestra and moving states. So I was on the phone with people talking about moving back to my home state of Pennsylvania from Connecticut. I was calling my friend Jan Royce saying, help, I need help with strings. I haven't had it since college. And, spent a couple days on her back deck talking strings and things like that. So, reaching out to people who can help you in a new position. This summer, I had someone who was an orchestra teacher who is now going to be teaching band and orchestra. And we had a grand old time on a Zoom call talking about, because I had done both, it was kind of fun. And I was like, oh yeah, actually, I can tell you a lot of similarities and differences and stuff like that. So it was really fun to help her with that transition too. So just to kind of know what you need and don't be afraid to reach out. And I think just finally, as a new teacher or someone in a new position at any stage of your career, don't be afraid to build that inner circle, those people who are your experts, who are your support system, your mentor, and just to know that that inner circle at times can become your shield to protect you when you're overcoming obstacles along the way. So Don't be hesitant. I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton on to Ginny.
Great. Thanks, Jenny, for all that advice. Thank you. As I thought about mentoring specifically during the pandemic, I was reminded of a man named Roderick Nash, who is considered to be America's foremost wilderness historian. And he says that the wilderness essentially is a state of mind. And he said the wilderness was the frightening, unordered condition from which man was relieved to have emerged. And several years ago, there were two Australian researchers, Johnson and Hager, who borrowed this concept of the wilderness in their study on mentoring young college graduates who are training to become professional orchestra musicians. They wrote that the wilderness is often conceived as a place where persons can become confused or get into a wild condition, and the wilderness years as a time of uncertainty where the vastness of life, choice, and roles bewilder actions that could be taken. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel like 2020 is a wilderness year. And it's a time when we continue to face uncertainty, so good mentoring matters more than ever right now. Even though a mentor may not be able to answer all of our questions, a mentor can provide some time and space where we can just catch our breath and maybe just talk about some of our COVID anxiety. So here's some healthy mentoring practices which I think are important during a pandemic. First of all, this is a time where we need and should focus on empathy. None of us has ever faced a situation like this before, and most of us just need to talk about things so that we can feel a little bit better. Sometimes we just need to talk about our emotions and give a voice to our anxiety. So mentors can help us during the pandemic when they focus on listening and empathizing. And they can say things like that well-worn phrase now, we're all in this together, or even something as simple as, you can reach out to me anytime you need to talk. The second thing is it's important to reach out to mentors. If you need to reach out to one, don't assume that he or she will be too busy for you. There are a lot of things going on right now, but people can always make time for you. Send your mentor a quick email or text. They may even be welcoming, waiting for you to contact them. Don't underestimate how giving to someone else can be a gift to the mentor. The third thing is to be curious. Try to get out of your pandemic routine and start new and better habits now. Sometimes it's just a matter of looking at things that you do day to day, but with a different set of eyes. A good mentor can help you open the doors to curiosity so that you can develop more enthusiasm to learn and grow. The fourth thing is, and I love this idea, make a hunger alignment with a mentor. Rajesh Sethi is a speaker and author who said that one important element of making thoughtful connections is what he calls hunger alignment. He said that we're all hungry for something that matters most to us. The deeper our hunger is, then the more intense our actions will be to satisfy that hunger. And what we crave now is meaningful help to satisfy that hunger. When we find someone who understands what we're hungry for at this point in time, we can find a meaningful connection that helps us to do more than survive. They can help us to thrive as we navigate through this wilderness. Now I'm going to pass it over to Lori.
Thank you, Ginny. So I might repeat a few of the things that were said since I'm the last one to answer this question, but we'll go from there. So last fall, I was asked to write an article for Teaching Music magazine on mentorship. And after brainstorming several ideas of how I wanted to approach this, I kept coming back to the skills that are needed for an engaged and enthusiastic mentee. And as I started looking at different things that had been written, not a lot had been written on the mentee. It was mostly on the mentor. And so I started putting together some things that I thought, having been the mentee for so long, what did a mentee need and what could be helpful to them? So the first skill was to acknowledge. Acknowledge that you want to be mentored and you're willing to be mentored. And then what are the specific skills that you want to improve? You might just want to get to know your mentor, but what specifically can that person do to help enhance your teaching? How are you going to expand those capabilities? And are you open to new ways of thinking? Because if you're searching for mentorship and not willing to hear new ways to do things, then it's not going to work. 2, ask. There is no shame in asking anyone for help. There is no shame in letting people know that you might not know all the answers. Showing vulnerability can be difficult, but it's necessary for growth. Identify a master educator you admire and respect. This person could be located inside of your school building or outside of your school building, like within your school system. Another level of teaching, if you teach middle school, maybe this person is elementary or high school, or if you're high school, elementary, or band. This person could be located in another region, state, or country. We've certainly proved right now that we can Zoom with anyone, anywhere. Or maybe they're serving in a different capacity. Maybe they now are a specialist in the field. Maybe they've become an administrator. Maybe this person is on leave. Maybe they're in grad school right now, or maybe they're retired. Any of these people would love to come back to the classroom and to offer assistance. And then consider someone who may have had similar challenges and was able to overcome them. I always say, don't go with the current trendsetter. Everyone's asking that person for advice and asking them to come into your classroom, but can they relate to everything that you need? For instance, are you teaching in a small rural school and is that trendsetter not? So we want to be finding people that can help us with where our needs are. Are we in a Title I school or school in corrective action? Are we teaching additional music courses beyond band? Looking for someone who's only conducting band isn't going to be helpful when we want to know how to balance all of these hats. Or is there someone, are you teaching another subject? I was teaching a course this summer and I had one of my adult students who's also teaching German, and she wanted to know how to handle, both subjects. Do you have a woman mentor, regardless if you're a woman or not? So I was fortunate that both of my parents were teachers, and my mom was English and reading, and my father was my elementary and high school band director. So I got to see him growing up, what he did, had him in class. But at the age of 42, I yet to still have had a female band director stand in front of me. So to this day, it's still important that I find those strong females, like many that are here, and that I've made mentors in my life, so I can see that it can be done well by a female in the field. Then value their time. Everyone is busy regardless of their position, their age, or their personal responsibilities. Provide valuable information on what you want and need from this mentorship. And ask that mentor to come in and observe your teaching or adjudicate your band even before you have a conversation. This might ignite the conversation, and it also may bring to light some of the strengths and limitations that you didn't even know existed. Someone can identify a strength in you that you didn't even know you were good at, and someone could identify a limitation that you weren't really aware of. Or they might see what's going on in the back row with the trombones or in the percussion section, and you had no idea that they were back there misbehaving. So be very clear when asking questions on particular areas of struggle. Consider establishing attainable goals with this mentor. Try not to complain. Don't put the blame on your administrator or the small band class that you have or the lack of instrumentation. You are the leader in your classroom. Let's look at ways that you can enhance that and grow that with what you have in front of you. 4, experiment. Mentorship doesn't equate to agreement. It means growth. And so you don't necessarily have to agree with everything that your mentor is offering to you, but you should be willing to experiment with that and see if you can get to a place where that can be successful for you and your students. Don't expect all the answers to be handed to you on a silver platter, and follow through with everything that's offered, and even finding supplemental material if needed. And then 5, show gratitude. How many times have we offered our help or responded to an email or had a phone call and we didn't get that thank you? Send that card, send that email, pick up the phone, let that person know a week, a month later how it has been successful in your classroom or what you had to tweak to get to that place. Mentorship happens at every phase of our life, and we may be surprised when we require it and how often we need it. And you never know when you might need to reach out to that same mentor again, and saying thank you would really set the tone. We're going to move on to our next question, and I think Jenny's going to answer that. So I'll pass the baton to her.
Great. Yes. Thanks, Lori, for all that info. And I know she's going to include her article in our resources, so look for that. Just like many of the other aspects of our lives in this pandemic, teaching can feel very isolating. How would you encourage individuals to pursue mentorship during this time? And we are going to go back to Lori for this one.
Okay, I just took my water. So I was sharing with the co-founders, and they're friends of mine, so they know this. I actually experienced this sense of isolation 4 years ago when I went on leave from my school system. I've shared this story before if you've been here. I wanted to be working part-time, but when I had both of my children at an older age in my career, I wanted to pump the brakes a little, spend more time with them. I didn't want to leave the profession completely, but my priorities were changing. I also wanted to explore professional avenues that I couldn't do within the restraints of a full-time job, particularly in the public school system. And so I experienced this isolation. First of all, you experience that isolation when you're a parent for the first time, when your hormones are all over the place and your emotions. But I also experienced it because my colleagues and my friends knew I was a hard worker, and they knew that I loved my job. And it was very tough to not be in the classroom full time with all of my colleagues and to see my students. And so I say, I experienced this isolation 4 years ago. And then I watched all of my colleagues and friends experience it in March and April and May. And it was like, ding, ding, ding. Oh my gosh, it was like watching myself in a mirror 4 years later. And so how would I encourage individuals to pursue mentorship during this time? Consider ways to be the mentee and ways to be the mentor. So if you're the mentee, we talked about this earlier, identify who has experienced similar challenges and struggles and succeeded. So after the first 2 sessions for women banding together, they were transitioning with resilience and actionable steps. I was so surprised. I had a handful of women who reached out to me via Facebook or email to just say, can I ask you some questions about your transition? And I'm about to have a child, or I have children, I'm thinking about leaving the school system, or I want to be teaching part-time, and so forth. And that was surprising to me. And we did so via Zoom or phone call and emails or questions. And I was able to share with them things that worked with me. They were willing to reach out. They put themselves in that vulnerable place to ask for help. I don't know anybody that would say no. And so making sure that you're asking and you're finding those people. And then now during the pandemic, it's been interesting. I see and hear from people who are either struggling during this time with, is this the right place for me? I don't feel successful in this situation. I'm looking at other options outside of the classroom full time. And they'll call and they'll talk. And the first thing I'll say is, what are the successes that you're having in your classroom with your students? Now let's build on those. And let's try to really find where this feeling of isolation is coming from. Because if you love your students and you love teaching them, you're going to find a way to do that through a screen. Even within my private studio, a couple months ago, I was noticing that I wasn't enjoying it as much. It took me a couple of nights to think about this, but I realized I wasn't playing along or modeling enough on my saxophone. The more I picked up my saxophone and was modeling and doing with them, I was enjoying the sessions even more, even though they were through a screen. Look outside your comfort zone. We often run to our band colleagues immediately, but they only know what we know and maybe a little bit more. So think about your non-band colleagues, your orchestra colleagues, your general music, their technology. What can they do to help you within your classroom or to balance what you're hoping to balance? Think about your non-music colleagues, your administrators. If you were here for our last session on building relationships, Shiny and John and I have built this mentor relationship with each other. Sometimes I'm helping her understand music. Many times she's helping me understand beyond the classroom. And then your non-educator friends. Maybe they see things in you as a person or a leader that can help you within your classroom that you wouldn't identify with your other teacher friends. And then this is the phrase I've been using a lot. Think globally, not just locally. We have such capabilities now with Zoom to be able to find mentors however we want. Be the mentor. 2 thoughts I want to say. Reach out to the younger you. If you are that experienced master teacher, reach out to that person that reminds you of yourself in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, whatever, and help them however you can. And then reach out to the older you. And so finding people that maybe you can even just inspire to feel relevant within the field or get back into working, observing, adjudicating. I know when I retire, I would hope that people will be reaching out to me. And so making that circle come full circle. Mentorships often turn into amazing friendships, and we need to cherish them at every place of our life. I'm going to pass the baton over to Ginny for her answer.
Great, thanks, Lori. I agree with what Lori was alluding to there, that although social distancing is necessary during this time, that we can still use the time to explore new ways of staying connected, and some old ways too, whether you're the mentor or the mentee. We've used the term a couple times already about organic relationships, and I want to talk just a little bit more about that. The process of finding mentors sometimes may be done very easily, organically, much more easily than you might think. And a good way to develop these mentoring relationships is by spending time to get to know colleagues at different types of events. And these do exist online during the pandemic. Just as Lori pointed out, with women banding together, we have events every month. In the summer, we were doing 2 events a month. So this is a great example. And please, just as people reached out to Lori and have reached out to us in the past, know that you can reach out to any or all of us at any time for mentoring. Also think about inviting another conductor or a teacher to one of your online classes. You don't have to wait until the pandemic is over. So by doing this, you could be opening the door to establish a relationship. I had a band director contact me last week or the week before, and she said that she talked about one of my marches in her class. She was talking about some new music and women composers. And when her students found out that she knew me, they were all excited about that. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, why didn't you contact me? I would have loved to have talked to your class. So keep those things in mind, especially with living composers and people who are here and now. Reach out to them, and they'd love to be able to share things with your students, and it gives some variety for your kids too. Second way that you can look for a mentor is to volunteer to help a potential mentor. If you identify someone who you'd like to have a mentoring relationship with, see if they're working on a project that you can help with and that you can learn from. This can be something, even now, we're still doing conferences We're still doing honors ensembles. They may not be playing, but they're still putting together the ensembles. So there may be someone that you could volunteer to help with that. If you're looking for experience in other business aspects, again, look for someone who's doing something that you want to learn more about and volunteer to help them. It's a great way to make a good relationship where you can learn from someone. And again, emphasizing again that you do need to schedule time to develop the relationships. It should be part of your routine, and you should set aside time every week to focus on that, whether it's through Facebook, LinkedIn, Zoom, email, or other methods of communication. And one other method of communication or platform that I want to mention is Slack. I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but it's a great program. I'm familiar with it because my family uses it. My father is in a skilled nursing facility, and for years we've used this to keep track of his information about caregivers, about his facility, about medications. And then recently we started another channel off to the side that's just for family things, because we realized we started talking about other things other than our father's care. And we have politics in there, inspirational things, TV and movies, just a great way to stay in touch. And you can have a team of people so that you all can communicate, and you can create what they call channels, so you can have different topics of things, or you can still have the ability to communicate directly with someone in there too. And I think it's a platform that other people could explore and use as well too. And then the other thing is attend other virtual events hosted by other people, and also look for ways to create your own virtual events. It can be, we do our happy hours. We've done them in the past, and we plan to do some more. But you may want to have your own happy hour with other people. And it doesn't just have to be band directors again. It can be people in other fields. It can be just women. It can be men and women, people, multi-generational, whatever you want. You can look for coffee dates. You can do workshops, any opportunity where you have a chance to maintain relationships and create meaningful connections. And then when you're done with that, especially if it's a workshop or some kind of a seminar, when you meet new people, you can pass along links to articles and other webinars that prospective mentors might be interested in. And that shows that you're interested in things that they're interested in too. And when you attend these kinds of things, don't forget to follow up with people afterwards. We've talked a lot about thanking people after they've done some mentoring for you. But anytime you meet someone who you think could be a potential mentor, reach out to them. I did a lot of different webinars this summer. It was just fascinating, things that were totally unrelated to music, but I learned so much from and met so many people through those, talking about such a variety of topics. And I reached out to several of them through LinkedIn. And so now I have these relationships that I have developed with people, even outside my field, but people from whom I'm learning a lot. And again, just remember to be able to reach out to them. And also, I do want to add on to this thing about showing gratitude for people. I think one of the best ways that you can show gratitude sometimes is this idea that we've talked about before, about inviting someone to come in and do a clinic with your group or talk to your class. It sort of validates that you really are interested in this mentoring relationship that you have with someone, and that you really value what they're giving to you by having them come in and share their knowledge with your ensemble or with your class. And so now I am going to pass it off to Laura.
Thank you, Jenny. I love everything you're saying about like the organic relationships and finding ways to have those opportunities. One of the greatest things that happened to me over this quarantine, I mean, we're still doing that quarantine, but at the beginning was having a female band director that I completely look up to, total fangirl for, invite me to one of her happy hours with her friends and her colleagues. And I just loved that, the fact that I was able to kind of come along with that crew and just get to network with new people. And now I have a whole new group, a whole new circle that I wouldn't have had before. And all it took was somebody saying, hey, you want to join us for this little informal get together? And that was perfect. That's what I needed. A lot of what I have is kind of already been said, but I want to reiterate something I said earlier, which was about honesty. In looking for mentorship or even just asking for help, especially during this time, it's important to be honest. And something I think I found with this pandemic is that teachers, or at least the teachers that are in my circle, are becoming much more honest with how we're feeling and what's going on in our lives and in our classrooms, instead of doing the, oh, I'm fine. I'm Minnesotan. That's our classic go-to. I'm fine. Everything's okay. Instead of doing that, we'll say, no, this is hard, or I'm struggling, or I need help. And we're shifting our focus to being honest and asking for that help. And so now I've been really trying to move myself forward in that direction and not hiding how I'm feeling or trying to put up a wall or some facade. Being honest about what I'm struggling with or what I need from people, it really helps focus my conversations with mentors and colleagues. So instead of me running down to my choir colleagues' room and saying, I just can't, or I'm overwhelmed, if I say, I have this one class that I need classroom management tips for, or something along those lines, that's an example. We can have that direct conversation and get to the root of the issue and solve it. It just makes life a lot more easy in this very chaotic time. And additionally, we've talked a lot about going out of your comfort zone. So I don't think I have to cover that too much, but just recognize that that can be a humbling experience to ask for help, and especially to ask for help from maybe somebody new or somebody you may not have that fully fledged relationship with, but you likely won't receive the guidance or support you need unless you ask. I think it was a big eye-opener for me to hear somebody in one of my circles say, administrators and other teachers likely assume you know what you're doing because you got hired. So at some level, they think you know what's going on. So they're not going to bother you unless you ask. And that to me was that eye-opening thing of, oh, okay, yeah, if I have a problem, I should not sweep it under the rug. I should ask somebody for help. So take that first step and be vulnerable. Whoever that may be that you need to ask that question to, just take that step and ask. And I keep talking about these circles, these people, your go-to. Like for me, I have to focus in on who I'm asking help for. I have a different person for different topics. So if I need a repertoire suggestion, I will ask somebody in my circle, but that person is not who I go to for classroom management. That's not their thing. Rep is their thing. So I would suggest to you that when you're looking for mentorship or guidance, we've kind of talked about this already, but think about what you need and then look at who you know and who's in your circle and try to assess who might be the best person to ask that question to. And if you're sitting here and you're like, okay, Laura, that's great. This is all great advice, but I don't have somebody, or I don't have the circle. We might be feeling that way, especially right now. I hear you. And I want to tell you, we kind of already said this too, but we have at least 4 women here, the 4 co-founders that would be happy to be that first step for you. Even if you came to me and you said, oh, Laura, I want help with something that I don't know. There's a lot of those things. But if you came to me and I didn't know the answer, I'd be happy to find somebody that I do know that might have a better answer for you. So you do have at least 4 people that you can go to, and we will help you take that next step. Building that mentorship connection is all about networking and just finding those people to put into your circle. So I just want you to know that you can say, I need help. Can you help me? Or if you can't help me, can you help me find somebody that might be able to? That's a great way to start building that network. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Jenny.
Thanks, Laura. Great advice once again. I think what we do know about this pandemic is this isolation has really been magnified during the pandemic. And so be sure to reach out to, to make that meaningful connection like we've been talking about. I know that someone sent me, I've had this happen a couple times in the past few weeks, where someone sent a message to me, but instead of texting it, they recorded themselves talking. And the first time I heard it was actually a birthday wish. And I was like, whoa, like it really took, I was kind of step back, like, oh, I'm not used to hearing a voice on a text message. And it was kind of cool, to hear like somebody's voice that you haven't talked to in a while, and you haven't been seeing people in person and going to lunch or whatever. And so, but it also said a lot about how we're just kind of craving that human connection that we really can't have during this whole, social distancing time. So, staying in touch with people and making sure that maybe we're doing that in very different ways than we would have sitting. I mean, some of my mentors, we've had our desks touching in the same office, right? Or maybe where, everybody sees each other in the mailroom, or you have the same planning period, or things like that, or things in your people in your department. So just try to make those intentional connections, but they might look a little bit different during the pandemic. And I think we shouldn't take anything for granted, just knowing that little story about the text message as a voice message, day-to-day things, that it's okay to reach out, whether you're the mentor or the mentee, to connect on just regular everyday things like, hey, how's it going? It doesn't have to be about a specific problem. It might be, but it's okay to just kind of check in. I know we're doing that with our students a lot, and I think that it's important for us to do that with each other as well, and maybe even with your principal. Speaking of administrators, I know that Laura had some great advice about when you do have an issue or something you need some support on. I think it's great you should never be afraid to ask for help, but especially as a newer teacher. I think most administrators would see that humility as a really positive characteristic that you have, and really value that. So I think that also shows them that you're willing to learn new things and work on things. And if there was something that was an issue that became bigger later on, they can say, hey, we've been working on this for a long time, and see that growth. So don't be afraid to ask. And I think being specific with the administrators a lot better than like, I just can't, or, complaining and that sort of thing. So and then finally, just I was thinking from the mentoring point of view, just some mentoring windows that I've read about recently in research, are things like finding opportunities to dialogue with your mentee, pinpointing and reiterating problems, noticing and acknowledging the growth, which I know we've all talked about tonight, and exploring your mentee's thinking with some questions. Instead of just telling your mentee what's wrong, maybe asking them, how did that go for you? Thinking aloud about your decision-making process to kind of model what that educator reflective thinking looks like. So I think those are some ways that from the mentor point of view, we can kind of step in without we don't want to take over. It's a little too much for people, and it's really not helping our mentee to do that. And just along the same lines of getting to know your mentee and checking in, just maybe setting some time aside just for some small talk, and making sure that we're all okay. I know that we might do that if we're in a building, but now it's a little bit harder to do that. So just being creative about thinking of new ways to do that. All right, so now I'm going to turn it back over to Laura, and we're going to open it up to some questions.
Jenny, do you think we want to do that first one?
So Laura, I'll let everyone know that we had, when you registered, we asked if there were any topics or questions that you had, and we do have a couple of people here who had submitted questions, so we'll try to get to those and then see what other questions we have. Laura, Margaret Flood had sent a question in.
Sure, so should I read the question, or do we want Margaret to ask it?
Either way.
I can just read it, unless Margaret, do you want to unmute at all?
Go ahead and read it, because that feels like it was light years ago when I responded. And I just taught for 11 hours today. So I'm going to let you handle
I feel that. Like, if that were me, I would be like, what did I write again? So yeah, the question, or just kind of the topic, was just the desperate, all caps, which I think is important, desire for mentorship among young directors. This came up frequently in the Frost Young Women Conductor Symposium. And when I saw this question or topic, I immediately latched onto it, because that's my research, is about mentorship specifically for women, either in the college directing field or kind of on that track. And just from my research, from my studies, you can see the undergraduates that participated, for the most part, indicated that they were really interested in having a mentor and having a female mentor, especially. And comparing the people, the established conductors, in my study, we're talking about they were much more willing to be a mentor, almost a large majority. I'd have to go back and look at the statistics, but a large majority indicated that they would be either somewhat or strongly interested in being that mentor, which is a complete change from research 20 some years ago, in which established conductors were not as willing to be mentors, especially female mentors were not as willing to do so. So I think we're seeing a really fantastic change in that we have women now that are willing to mentor top down, and we have young women that are wanting to be mentored. And for myself, I feel like that reason why is we just don't want to feel alone. We want to feel like we have at least one go-to person to collaborate with, to ask questions for. And we know from research and from personal anecdotes that this field can be really isolating, especially for young women. So to have at least one other person in our corner, I think is something that a lot of people are interested in. So hopefully we've given you a couple like hows, or how we can get these young women to find some mentorship. And our keywords have been like expanding your circle and attending events, or getting out of that comfort zone and trying to meet some new individuals and asking questions and trying to build some organic relationships. But I will say, I think our path, we're on the right trajectory here, at least in what I've been seeing, in that we have people now willing to be that mentor. So I'm hoping we continue onto that path.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, that helps. All of this helped a lot. And it was part of a lot of the conversation in September. And I think one thing that just was brought up was just the missing connection and people just hesitating to reach out to folks. And some of my students are on here right now too. And they heard me say over and over again, please, it doesn't matter who it is, please reach out and connect to these people. Like, I reached out to Joanne Folletta and she came and spoke. And now we have a connection and we are actually talking and emailing each other to a point where we actually have created a little bit of a relationship, so that in the future, when I re-envision it and make it in person, I have someone in my court that's willing to also be a mentor and excited about it. But yeah, that missing connection seems to be the topic of discussion right now, because of a lot of siloing we see still across the country. And the fact that these events are starting to pop up more and more and people are starting to see the same names and faces is really cool. Like I see a couple names that I am familiar with, both from my own symposium and some other events that I've been to. So I appreciate it. And thank you folks for hosting this.
Of course, I love what you said about the connection thing. I think that word connection is what's really important. And for the band directors here that have current students, I gave a session at VMEA just this last weekend about what we can be doing to support young women in our classes that would like to be band directors. And one of them is what you did. You talking about bringing in a guest, bringing in somebody that represents our field. And then if they're comfortable with it, that's the key word, is comfortable, seeing if they would be willing to continue that connection with your students. That's something that I didn't really get when I was going through the K-12 system. And if I had had that, I think I would have had more female mentors sooner. So if you are a teacher here with us, maybe consider bringing in that guest and seeing if they'd be willing to have some communication with you and your students after that meeting. I think that might be helpful too. We can maybe pass it to Jenny or Ginny, looking at the second or the third question.
Well, we have another participant with us tonight, Scott Blanky, who asked a question. And since he's here, Scott, did you want to ask your question of us?
Yes, I kind of had a question regarding What are good methods to build relationships with students during a pandemic or during times where it's virtual, especially new students who you haven't had any communication with in person?
I'd be willing to jump in first if okay. I started a new position this year. So at the beginning of the year we were virtual and I'd never met any of my students and that was a big concern for me. So in starting out the year, I put a really big emphasis on SELs, social emotional learning, and doing some SEL check-ins every day. And even though we're in November, I still do those, and that's how I take attendance. I'll ask them things that might be band related. Every Friday, we do would you rather questions that are kind of goofy and just gets them talking. Tomorrow will be what are you grateful for? And they just have to share either in the chat or if they're in person, since we are hybrid, they can just audibly share as well. That's a great way to kind of get to know them without doing a get to know you form or something where they have extra busy work to do. So I'm a firm believer in SELs. And then also just getting input on what they want to do, giving some student choice. We are going to be doing a project coming up post Thanksgiving break of them playing a theme from a TV show or a movie or even just like a pop song, just a couple measures, but they pick it. I'm going to help them write it out and then they'll practice it and perform it. So that's that student choice that's there for them so that they're engaged and they want to be there and be playing along with what you're doing. So doing those check-ins and giving some student choice has been really helpful for me getting to know them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if the other three co-founders have anything they want to add.
I'll just throw in because I'm teaching a class online at Juilliard this semester, and it's a little easier in the spring because I already knew the students before we went online. But this time I've done a number of things differently, but it started out by making a video where I introduced myself and I talked a little bit about the class. And then I had each of the students do an introduction through Flipgrid. And if you haven't done Flipgrid, it's a great program to be able to use with your students. And it just, it for one thing, it helped me to learn the faces and the names even before that first class. But that to me was a wonderful way of starting to establish that relationship. And I do things like Laura had talked about too at the beginning of the class. I'll do some check-ins then and some questions on different things, how things are going with them.
Okay, thank you.
I think too, I'd agree with Laura and Jenny. I've done both of those with MAT students and the thesis class I teach in the summer for UArts. And I think especially with undergrads and graduate students who are in right now, in order to get them to engage more, they want to talk to one another. So, the less we can just be, I know we have some information content that we need to deliver, but also using those breakout rooms and letting people work together and talk together because they're just not in the hallways together and hanging out before and after class and that sort of thing. So just giving a little bit more time to collaborate and have those, engaging discussions. And then people are going to feel more comfortable sharing that with the rest of the class. So I like to do a lot of different activities and just keep a lot of flexible grouping going on.
Sure, and I'll jump in too. So I like to think about it through the VARC learning style. So you're thinking about, you might have a student who loves writing and reading. And so they may be, like myself, might be able to express themselves better through writing than they would through speaking or just doing some quick little things in chat. They want to draft their thoughts and then share it. And so if we think about this from the lens of the band room, what can we do with this? We can use program notes for this. So you could introduce a piece of music to your ensemble without sharing either who the composer is or what the program note is, and ask your students to write what they hear. What are they imagining that this piece is about? And write that in the program note, and you'll, as their program note, and see if they're willing to share it, one with you, and then possibly share it with each other. And that might be a really great opportunity for you to get into their head. What are they thinking about? And it might come through with their personality. It might come through with what they're struggling with personally and so forth. But thinking beyond speaking and thinking of all the learning styles of our students, kinesthetically, reading, writing, and so forth.
Thank you.
That was a really great question. I'm glad we had time to get to that one. Before we wrap up though, are there any questions from you all now? Those were from previously submitted questions. So we want to just offer up a chance either in the chat or can unmute too if you have a question you'd like to ask for the greater good. And you have to do the 10-second wait. I've learned this with virtual learning, but sometimes it's more like 20 with middle schoolers as they.
Yeah, I also think that
Fingers.
10-second wait is a lot longer online. Seems a lot longer.
I have these a couple of students that have their noses up to the camera, so you only see their eyes and then you can see their fingers at the same time, typing away.
I would just love to say that it's interesting. I was wondering who was going to be coming to this session. Would it be people who are looking for a mentor? Would it be people who have served as mentors? And it's so neat to see the mix of people that we have here. Some of the people in here have been a mentor to me, or I know have been a mentor to others. And so it's really great to see the diversity of people that we have as far as mentees, mentors, and what everyone brings to the table.
Well, if we do think of questions, this is a great segue of saying you can, of course, email any of us, email our Women Banding Together email address. We would love to help you out. Even if it's I'm not sure, but I will find you someone that knows. I'm happy to serve in that role. So as we near the end of this session today, I just want to thank you all again for being here tonight. These times, as we said at the beginning, are beyond challenging, but I hope that we were able to provide some form of support and encouragement for you all. As we do at the end of each of our sessions, I want to share a quote. And like the overachieving but also indecisive person I am, I chose two quotes because I couldn't pick, but they're both by Brené Brown, so they go together. I'm just going to kind of segue between the two of them. So the first quote is, "Somehow we've come to equate success with not needing anyone. Many of us are willing to extend a helping hand, but we're reluctant to reach out for help when we need it ourselves. It's as if we've divided the world into those who offer help and those who need help. The truth is that we are both." Segueing to the next one, "We don't have to do it all alone. We were never meant to." To each of you tonight, remember you have people in your corner here. Please stay tuned to our Facebook page for the recording of this session that we encourage you to share with whoever may need it, as well as resources from some of our colleagues about upcoming events and the date and topic for our December panel event. Additionally, Jenny and Lori will be presenting at Key of She on Tuesday, December 1st, which will be a fantastic event. So we encourage you all to check it out. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and holiday. Thank you for being with us.